Emily Harper had just shut down her computer when the message popped up on her screen. Mr. Cole would like to see you in the conference room. It was 5:52 p.m., the office nearly empty, the skyline of Chicago glowing orange and gold beyond the tall glass windows. Her pulse jumped. Meetings at that hour were rare, and private meetings were even rarer. She sat still for a moment, staring at the words as if they might change, but they didn't. Around her, desks were dark, chairs pushed in, the soft hum of the air system filling the silence. She quickly checked her email, scanning for mistakes in the quarterly report she had sent earlier. Numbers, charts, projections, everything looked clean. Still, doubt crept in. Ethan Cole was known for precision. He noticed details others missed. Had she overlooked something small but important? She grabbed her notebook and stood, smoothing her navy blazer as if that could steady her nerves. The walk down the hallway felt longer than usual. Each step echoed softly against the carpet. She passed framed awards on the wall, evidence of the company's success under Ethan's leadership. He was respected across the firm, calm, sharp, disciplined. He rarely raised his voice, which somehow made his approval more powerful and his silence more intimidating. Emily had always admired him from a careful distance. Not just because he was her boss, but because he carried himself with quiet strength. He listened when others spoke. He remembered details about clients' lives. He stayed late, just like she did. Sometimes, during long strategy sessions, their eyes would meet across the table for a brief second longer than necessary. She had told herself it meant nothing. She had built her career on focus, not feelings. The conference room door stood slightly open, warm light spilling into the hallway. She paused outside, took a slow breath, and knocked lightly. "Come in," Ethan's voice called, steady but softer than usual. She pushed the door open. The room looked the same as always, the long oak table, leather chairs, a screen at the far wall, but the atmosphere felt different. Personal. Ethan stood by the window, his suit jacket draped over the back of a chair, sleeves rolled up to his forearms. The city lights reflected faintly in the glass behind him. For a second, he didn't speak. He simply looked at her, and in that look there was something thoughtful, almost hesitant. "Emily," he said finally, giving a small nod. "Thank you for staying." "Of course," she replied, trying to keep her voice calm. She took a seat halfway down the table, placing her notebook in front of her like a shield. He closed the door gently, and the quiet click seemed louder than it should have been. The air felt warmer inside the room. She could hear her own heartbeat. Ethan didn't sit right away. He walked to the head of the table, then stopped, as if reconsidering, and chose the chair closer to her instead. That small decision didn't go unnoticed. "I won't take much of your time," he began, folding his hands together. His expression wasn't stern. It wasn't disappointed. It was serious, yes, but layered with something she couldn't quite read. Her mind ran through possibilities, budget changes, team restructuring, new assignments. She had worked hard the past few months, staying late to refine client strategies, volunteering to present when others hesitated. She believed in her work. Still, doubt whispered that maybe she had overstepped somewhere. Ethan studied her for a brief moment before speaking again. "You've done exceptional work this quarter." The words surprised her so much she almost didn't react. "Thank you," she said softly. Praise from him was rare and always earned. "Your analysis on the Westbrook account was sharp," he continued. "And your leadership during the Henderson transition didn't go unnoticed." Heat rose to her cheeks. She hadn't expected compliments. She had prepared herself for correction, not recognition. But even as relief settled in, she sensed that wasn't the only reason she was there. Ethan leaned back slightly, exhaling as if gathering courage. Outside, a siren wailed faintly in the distance, quickly fading. The city kept moving, unaware of the shift happening in this quiet room. Emily noticed the way his fingers tapped lightly against the table before going still. He looked composed, yet something beneath that composure seemed unsettled. "I asked you here because there's an opportunity," he said carefully. The word opportunity sent a spark through her. Her career had always been her anchor. She moved to Chicago from a small town in Ohio with nothing but ambition and a single suitcase. She had promised herself she would build something solid, something lasting. If this was about growth, she was ready. But the way he said it made her chest tighten instead of lift. "An opportunity," she repeated. He nodded once, holding her gaze. In that moment, the professional distance between them felt thinner than usual. Not inappropriate. Just fragile. "Yes," he said. "And it could change things." The phrase hung in the air. Change things. Her thoughts rushed forward, new projects, new responsibilities, maybe even relocation. She imagined packing boxes, saying goodbye to her apartment, starting fresh in another city. The idea thrilled and frightened her at the same time. Ethan's eyes softened slightly, and she realized he wasn't just thinking about the company. He was thinking about her. That awareness made her pulse quicken for a different reason. For months, there had been an unspoken tension between them. Nothing crossed lines. Nothing improper. Just moments, shared laughter after a stressful presentation, a late-night coffee run during deadline week, conversations about childhood dreams that stretched a little too long. She had convinced herself it was harmless. Professional admiration. Mutual respect. Yet sitting there now, with the door closed and the city fading into twilight, it felt like the beginning of something she hadn't prepared for. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering. "I wanted you to hear this from me first." The words were simple, but the way he said them made her breath catch. Whatever came next would not be ordinary. It would not be just another assignment. Emily straightened in her chair, bracing herself. The quiet between them deepened, filled with possibility and risk. She had walked into the conference room expecting a routine conversation about numbers and deadlines. Instead, she felt as if she were standing at the edge of a turning point. And as Ethan opened his mouth to continue, the last light of the sun disappeared behind the skyline, leaving the room glowing under soft ceiling lights. Holding its breath along with her, Ethan held her gaze for a second longer before speaking, and Emily felt the air shift as if the room itself understood that something important was about to be said. He told her there was a position opening in the New York branch, senior strategy lead, a role that came with more responsibility, a larger team, and direct access to high-profile clients, and the words landed between them like a sudden storm, powerful and unexpected. Because she had dreamed of growth but had not imagined it arriving so quietly at the end of an ordinary day. She blinked, trying to process the speed of it. New York meant long nights, bigger projects, faster competition, and a skyline that never slept. And part of her heart leaped at the thought while another part tightened with fear. He explained that the board had asked for recommendations and he had given them only one name, hers, and she felt warmth rush to her face. Not because of flattery but because of what it meant. He had been watching her work closely, believing in her without telling her. She asked why she hadn't been informed earlier, and he admitted the offer had come through that afternoon, and he wanted her to hear it from him before human resources made it official. The honesty in his voice made it clear this was not a routine announcement. He outlined the details quickly: higher salary, relocation support, a chance to lead her own strategy team within months, and each sentence felt like a door opening toward a future she had once written in her journal as a distant goal. She pictured herself walking through Manhattan streets, leading meetings with confidence, proving to herself that she belonged among the best, yet even as ambition stirred inside her, she felt something else pulling her back to that. Conference room. Ethan's tone shifted when he said, "If you accept, you'd move in 3 weeks," and 3 weeks sounded both close and far, close enough to feel real, far enough to still be uncertain. She looked around the room, suddenly aware that this space had been the center of her growth, the place where she had learned to speak up, to present ideas without shaking, to trust her instincts, and she realized that leaving would mean more than a new address, it would mean stepping away from the rhythm of working with him. She asked him directly whether he thought she should go, and for a brief moment the polished executive mask slipped, revealing a man weighing his words carefully. He said she deserved every opportunity that came her way, that her talent should not stay confined to one office, and she heard the professional answer clearly, yet she searched his eyes for something more personal. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not uncomfortable, just full of thoughts neither had planned to share. She pressed gently, asking again what he wanted, not as her boss but as a person who had spent long evenings discussing strategy and life with her, and he inhaled slowly before admitting he did not want her to leave. The confession was quiet, steady, not dramatic, yet it carried more emotion than raised voices ever could. Her heart reacted before her mind did, and she felt both relief and confusion because she had sensed the unspoken connection for months but had never expected him to acknowledge it so openly. He clarified that his feelings did not change her achievement, that the promotion was earned purely by her work, and she appreciated the respect in that reassurance. He explained that leadership required fairness, that he had held back personal thoughts to avoid influencing her growth, and she understood the weight of that restraint. Still, knowing he would miss her changed the shape of the offer, turning it from a simple career step into a crossroads. She thought about her small apartment in Chicago, the coffee shop downstairs where she wrote weekend plans, the familiar bus route she took each morning, and then she thought about New York's bright lights and endless chances, and both visions felt real, possible, alive. Ethan watched her carefully, not pushing, not persuading, just giving her space to think. And that patience made her chest ache because it showed how deeply he respected her independence. She asked what would happen to the team if she left, and he said they would adapt, that companies always adjust, but his voice softened when he added that some adjustments were harder than others. The words carried layers she did not need explained. She stood slowly, walking toward the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline that had once seemed so huge when she first arrived from Ohio with nothing but hope, and she realized she was no longer the uncertain girl who had stepped into her first interview trembling. She had grown strong here, confident, capable, partly because Ethan had challenged her to think bigger. Turning back to him, she saw not just her boss but someone who had quietly supported her rise, someone who had kept a careful distance to protect her reputation, someone who now looked as if he were preparing to let her go for her own good. The room felt warmer, charged with emotion yet grounded in maturity, and she understood that whatever decision she made would shape more than her career, it would shape the story of who she was becoming. Ethan finally said he would support her choice completely, whether she stayed or left, that leadership sometimes meant stepping aside so others could climb higher, and his calm acceptance made her eyes sting. The offer letter would arrive in her inbox by morning, he told her, and she would have 48 hours to respond, 48 hours to decide between comfort and challenge, between a city she knew and a future she had imagined, between working beside a man who had become important to her and chasing a version of herself that demanded courage. As she gathered her notebook and prepared to leave, the weight of possibility pressed against her heart, and she realized that this invitation into the conference room was not just about a promotion but about choice, about love and ambition standing quietly across from each other, waiting for her to decide which voice to follow. When she reached the door, she paused, feeling his eyes on her back, knowing that whatever answer she gave would change not only her address but the space between them forever. The silence after his confession felt alive, moving through the room like a quiet wind, and Emily stood there trying to steady her breath as Ethan's words settled deep in her heart. He had said he cared about her, more than he should, and the honesty in his voice removed every doubt she had carried for months. She remembered the late evenings when they had stayed behind reviewing slides while the cleaning crew moved softly around them. The way he would pause and really listen when she spoke, the rare half-smile he saved only for moments when she surprised him with a bold idea, and suddenly all those small memories formed a clear picture she could no longer ignore. Ethan straightened slightly as if preparing to take responsibility for everything he had just revealed, and he explained that he had drawn strict lines from the beginning because leadership meant protecting both the company and the people within it, and he never wanted her success to be questioned or reduced to whispers in the hallway. His voice carried no regret for feeling something real, only regret that circumstances made it complicated. Emily felt emotion rise in her chest, not dramatic or overwhelming, just deep and steady, like a tide she could not hold back. She told him she had sensed the change between them long ago but had convinced herself it was admiration mixed with long hours, and she admitted that she had guarded her heart carefully because she respected him too much to risk crossing a boundary. He listened without interrupting, his eyes steady, absorbing each word as if it mattered deeply, and that attention made her feel seen in a way she had rarely experienced before. He stepped closer to the table, not close enough to break professionalism, but close enough that the distance felt personal, and he said feelings did not follow corporate policies, that sometimes connection grew quietly in shared ambition and mutual respect. Emily felt a faint smile touch her lips despite the tension because his honesty carried warmth rather than pressure. He made it clear he would never ask her to stay for him, that her career came first, that love built on sacrifice would only turn into regret, and hearing him say that made her heart ache even more because it showed strength instead of selfishness. She walked slowly toward the center of the room, needing movement to think clearly, and she admitted that leaving for New York suddenly felt heavier than it had minutes before, not because she feared the challenge but because she feared losing the daily presence of someone who had become important to her without her realizing it. Ethan's expression softened when she said that, and for a brief second the powerful executive image faded completely, replaced by a man standing vulnerable in front of a woman he respected. He told her that every time she walked into a meeting she changed the energy of the room, that her confidence had grown in ways that inspired even him, and that watching her rise had been one of the most rewarding parts of his year. Those words wrapped around her heart gently, and she felt tears gather though she refused to let them fall. She asked him what he expected to happen now that everything was out in the open, and he answered with quiet certainty that honesty was better than silence, even if it complicated things, because unspoken feelings could turn into distance or misunderstanding. He believed clarity gave them strength, no matter what choice she made. Emily admired that about him, the way he faced uncomfortable truths without drama. She realized that what drew her to him was not power or status but steadiness, the calm way he handled pressure, the respect he showed others, the integrity he refused to compromise. She admitted that her feelings were not sudden, that they had grown slowly in small moments, sharing coffee after a long client call, laughing quietly over a minor mistake in a presentation, exchanging looks across the table when a risky idea actually worked. Each memory felt innocent yet meaningful, proof that connection can build quietly through trust. Ethan listened and nodded, acknowledging the shared history without exaggerating it. He said timing was complicated but not impossible, that life rarely offered perfect circumstances, only choices that required courage. His words were not a plea, just a reflection, and that difference mattered deeply to her. She felt both lighter and heavier at the same time, lighter because truth was finally spoken, heavier because truth demanded action. She understood that staying would blur professional lines unless handled carefully, and leaving might create distance strong enough to cool what they felt. The reality was not romantic in a dramatic sense but mature and real. She asked him if he believed in second chances, and he answered that he believed in right timing, that if two people were meant to build something lasting, patience would not destroy it. That answer settled into her heart like a promise without pressure. She realized then that The conference room had transformed from a place of strategy to a place of vulnerability, and neither of them had expected that when the day began. The city lights outside shimmered through the glass, reminding her that life continued beyond this room, full of opportunities and risks. She took a slow breath and told him she needed time, not to escape the feeling but to understand it fully, and he agreed immediately, saying he wanted her decision to come from strength, not emotion alone. That respect reassured her. She stepped back slightly, creating space again, aware that professionalism still mattered even in honesty. Ethan gave a small nod, as if sealing an unspoken agreement between them. No promises were made, no dramatic declarations followed, only quiet understanding. Emily felt the weight of possibility resting gently on her shoulders. She knew that whatever she chose would shape both her career and her heart, and for the first time she saw that success and love did not have to compete, but they did require bravery. As she prepared to leave the room, she looked at him one more time, seeing not just her boss but a man who had chosen truth over fear, and in that moment she understood that this conversation, more than the promotion itself, had already changed her in ways she could never undo. Emily stepped out of the conference room with her heart beating fast, the hallway lights brighter than before, her mind filled with questions that refused to slow down. The office was almost empty now, only a few desks lit in the distance, and she walked back to her workspace feeling as if the ground beneath her had shifted. 3 weeks, New York, a promotion, and Ethan's quiet confession circled in her thoughts like a storm that had not yet decided where to land. She sat down but did not turn her computer back on, instead staring at the reflection of the city in the dark screen, asking herself what kind of woman she wanted to become. She had always promised she would choose growth over comfort, ambition over fear, yet tonight the choice felt deeper than career. She packed her bag slowly, remembering the first day she had entered this building nervous and hopeful, remembering how Ethan had shaken her hand with polite distance, unaware that one day they would stand in a conference room sharing truths neither had planned to speak. The elevator ride down felt long and silent, and when the doors opened to the cool Chicago evening, she breathed in deeply as if the air might carry an answer. Over the next 2 days she moved through life carefully, attending meetings, answering emails, presenting strategies, all while aware that a decision waited in her inbox. Ethan remained professional, calm in every interaction, never hinting at what had passed between them, and that steadiness made her respect him even more. There were no secret glances, no dramatic tension, only mutual understanding, and that maturity reassured her that whatever they felt was real and not built on impulse. At night she walked along the lakefront thinking about New York's bright lights, picturing herself in a new office leading her own team, proving to herself that she could rise even higher. She also imagined walking into work each morning and not seeing Ethan across the room, not hearing his steady voice guiding a discussion, and that absence felt heavier than she expected. She called her older sister in Ohio for advice, describing the promotion in careful detail but hesitating before mentioning her feelings. Her sister reminded her that love should not shrink ambition and ambition should not silence love, that life sometimes asks for bold steps, and Emily listened quietly, knowing the answer would have to come from her own heart. On the final evening before she had to respond, she stayed late again, not because she needed to but because she wanted one more quiet moment inside the building that had shaped her. She stood by the window near her desk watching the traffic below, remembering Ethan's words about right timing and patience. She realized he had never asked her to choose him over her career, never tried to influence her decision, and that freedom felt like trust. In that realization something became clear: the opportunity in New York was not running away from him, and staying in Chicago was not clinging to comfort. The real question was where she believed she would grow most, not just professionally but personally. She opened the offer email again, reading each line slowly, then closed her eyes and pictured herself 5 years from now. In one vision she saw herself stronger, experienced, independent, returning to Chicago not as an employee but as an equal, ready to stand beside Ethan without imbalance. In another vision she saw herself wondering what might have been if she had not taken the leap. The second image unsettled her more than distance ever could. With steady hands she typed her response accepting the New York position. Her heart pounding not from fear but from courage. She knew the choice might stretch the connection between her and Ethan, but she also believed that something built on respect could survive space. The next morning she knocked on his office door, her expression calm. He looked up and immediately understood that a decision had been made. She told him she had accepted the promotion, her voice steady though emotion shimmered beneath it. For a brief second something flickered in his eyes, a mix of pride and sadness. But he stood and congratulated her sincerely, saying the company was lucky to have her, saying New York would challenge her in the best ways. She thanked him for believing in her first, for recommending her, for telling her the truth when it mattered. There were no dramatic gestures, only a quiet moment where both acknowledged that caring sometimes means letting go. He reminded her that 3 weeks remained, and they would use them wisely to prepare her transition. She nodded, appreciating that he was giving their ending structure instead of confusion. Over the following days they worked closely but carefully, planning handovers, discussing strategy, laughing occasionally at small mistakes, and in those moments their connection felt steady rather than fragile. On her last evening in the Chicago office, the team gathered to wish her well, unaware of the deeper story behind her move. After everyone left, she stood once more in the conference room where everything had changed. Ethan joined her briefly, keeping a respectful distance, and told her he was proud of the leader she had become. She smiled and said that meeting had changed her day and perhaps her life, because it had forced her to see her own worth clearly. He replied that courage often begins with one honest conversation. When they finally walked out together, the hallway lights dimming behind them, there was no promise spoken, yet hope lingered quietly between them. As she left the building and stepped into the night air, she felt both sadness and excitement, knowing she had chosen growth without denying her heart. The plane to New York would leave in a week, and the future remained unwritten, but she carried with her the certainty that real connection does not disappear simply because distance grows. Sometimes it waits, patient and steady, for the right season. And as Ethan watched her walk away that final evening, he understood that inviting her into the conference room had not only changed her day, it had changed them both, teaching them that love rooted in respect can survive ambition, and that the bravest choice is often the one that allows both people to rise.